For a long time, I've looked up to channels like Shafrillis Productions and I Hate Everything. Their eloquent points, their commentary, the personality that has drawn people to them, and of course the funny man screaming at a plant, and thought, wow, what I wouldn't give to be able to engage people like that, to be able to give back to the YouTube community that has entertained me for so long, to offer something else. The problem is, I didn't and rarely do have anything interesting to say. Until I rifled through my DS drawer and discovered a game from my childhood that had slipped my mind. And apparently everyone else's too. This game was Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure. Now, I won't claim to be a game critic, though I do have my reservations about the consensus of some games. Even though I can tell a good story from a bad one, I'm pretty easily impressed. But I will be honest, rhythm games in and of themselves are underrated, and Rhythm Thief is so underrated in that genre that I finally felt compelled to show its joy to the world. By no stretch of the imagination is it the best game ever, but it's one that I feel a lot more people should experience. It's great fun, and I've come back to it on many occasions throughout my life to be pleasantly surprised that I was not blinded by childhood nostalgia. We're gonna, ignore the fact that I had a giant fictional crush on the main character. Redhead video game thieves are apparently my type. So please sit down, stand up, lie down, do whatever's comfortable, because I'm prone to rambling, and please enjoy my case for why this is the 3DS's most underrated gem. I mean, obviously the most important part of a rhythm game is its music, or at least it's a big part. And thankfully, like quite a lot of Sega games, Rhythm Thief has amazing music. The main theme, Phantom R's theme, is one of my favourites. You would have heard it in the intro of this video. Throughout the game, Phantom R's theme acts as a leitmotif, even in the TikTok famous song Looting the Louvre. Now, if you haven't played Rhythm Thief but have heard of it, it's probably because of Looting the Louvre. I use TikTok exclusively for the weird side of it, so I was pretty late to this trend, but I was pleasantly surprised to see people praising this soundtrack that I've been listening to since I was 10. Still, Looting the Louvre is pretty much the only song in the soundtrack that's kicked off in popularity. You can see that by looking at the difference in views between it and, say, Moon Princess. Moon Princess is my favourite song in the game, mainly because I'm a sucker for pretty violin songs, and it's the minigame that I am the best at. But there are some other big, fat, sizzling bangers that deserve props. Phantom Fondue's a crazy song that accompanies a game where you're a dog biting the ass of any cops who dare to cross your path. It's pure joy and comedy, and I love it. It's such an iconic moment in the game that listening to the song makes me remember the exact rhythms from the minigame. Melody of Hope is a tense song that accompanies a more difficult violin rhythm game that I've always admired from the way it conveys absolute fear at the start, only to transition pretty perfectly to a melody not quite the same as, but very, very reminiscent of Moon Princess. It utilises kind of the same chord progressions and a couple shared melodies. Flight from the Gardens is a song that uses the Phantom R leitmotif to make it really seem like a climax. I know I used to replay this level all the time just to hear the song, even though I was kind of awful at the actual minigame. The soundtrack version doesn't quite do it justice. If you've played Rhythm Thief, you know what I mean. It's not the same without the guy booing because you messed up once and now suddenly your grade's at a D. And also, apparently there's a song called Jump Meat Strategy, which is from a post-game minigame. I thought that was important information. There are also a couple covers of classical songs which I think suit the tone of the game really well. Tryouts is a modern cover of Bach's Tryouts is a modern cover of Bach's Air on G string, and Shall We Dance is the Blue Danube but in jazz form. These covers occur at a very fitting point in the game, which I'm only withholding because I really, really want people to experience this game for themselves. Every piece suits the level they're based on perfectly, which is bare minimum for a rhythm game, but honestly, every single song for me is really memorable. Whenever I listen to them, I remember exactly what happens in the level, I remember exactly what buttons to press. I could probably play Moon Princess with my eyes shut. This game's story is by no stretch of the imagination a masterpiece, but there are some cool reveals, tense moments, and stylised cutscenes that tell its relatively simple tale very well. I really want to refrain from doing a whole summary of the game's story. I played this game before I knew what a spoiler was, so I went in blind, and though childlike wonder probably had something to do with it, I found myself genuinely surprised at some of the events. I'll give you a rundown of the premise though. Raphael is our main character, also known as Phantom R. He's a thief who steals artwork only to return it the next day. One day his father disappeared without a trace, leaving him only a coin with a weird mark as some kind of cryptic clue. 3 years later he lives this double life, accompanied by marketable sidekick Fondue. The game begins as he's planning to steal the Bracelet of Tiamat, which bears the same mark as the coin, finally given a lead. Like I said, not the stuff of miracles, but it's a pretty interesting kick-off for a twisty-turny mystery story. Phantom R's a pretty great protagonist, though it's a good thing that the majority of the people who live in his apartment building are seemingly blind. He's not the subtlest of thieves, but I think this is explained pretty well by his motivations. He's not really thinking straight a lot of the time. His one mission is to find his father, and to me it reads like he rushes into things as long as he feels like they might contribute to that goal. Plus, he's a bit of a thrill seeker. He warns the police of his planned crime at the start of the game because he has a bit of a cat and mouse game with the head detective, Inspector Vergier. Marie, someone who many might dismiss as the token girl, is a very sympathetic and interesting character in my opinion. From the moment you meet her, there's something mystical and interconnected about her, be it her backstory or the cool reveal about her violin, that I'm not going to say. Toward the beginning of the game, she's a bit of a damsel in distress, but she kind of breaks out of that shell throughout. The villain's kinda cheesy, but not in a bad way. He's good fun and builds to be a genuine threat through those who surround him, and his motivation actually kind of explains why he's as cheesy as he is. I know that sounds weird, but it actually makes sense, I promise. There are a lot more characters, but because I want people who watch this video to play the game, I won't go too deep into any more of them. Side note, I really love the character design in this game. One in particular is the villains, but to explain why would be going a bit far into my trying not to spoil objective of this video. What I will say is look close. The biggest factor of every game is, of course, the gameplay. Now, if you don't like rhythm games, I'm not really sure how much you'll get out of it, but I will bet you'll have some fun. I'm quite a musical person, but I do think that it's quite a beginner-friendly experience to start with, given the fact that the game offers guidelines and visual aid that you can turn off if you want a bit more of a challenge. Some of the post-game is ridiculously hard, and if you go out of time during Marie's levels, you're boned. It's pretty harsh too. If you mess up even once, your grade can go from an A to a C in one fell swoop. It happened to me last time I replayed Flight of the Gardens. I wanted to throw my DS out the window. Marie's violin levels are the ones I'm the best at, but any of the dance levels are always really fun. I personally always enjoyed Hurry Up and Wait. Even the overworld exploration and puzzles are fun, though sometimes the game can drag its feet a little in the middle when a bit of repetition starts to leak in. That's a pretty minor complaint for me though. Having lived through grindfests like Pokemon Platinum and loved them, I can deal with a bit of repetition. Plus the huge amount of collectibles makes this overworld exploration much more bearable. The puzzles are not hard at all. An actual toddler could probably do them, but they aren't poorly made, and they're a nice way to vary the gameplay a bit. Collecting sounds and music and movies in the overworld was always something I spent hours doing as a child. I was mainly trying to unlock access to Flight from the Gardens and Moon Princess's soundtracks because I didn't have a phone yet and couldn't listen to them at my own discretion. Now there are a couple games that utilise motion sensors because it's a Nintendo system, and of course they do. The throwdown games use it as a left and right dodge, which I never found that bad and actually got me to do a bit of exercise when I was trying to get a perfect rank on either of them. But since I've been singing this game's praises, I have to mention the worst thing about it, which to me is pretty much the only bad thing about it. That is my old arch nemesis, R31, Gone with the Wind. I won't give many details about the content of this minigame because it's the product of one of my favourite moments in the game. But basically, you're controlling a hang glider with a motion sensor and you have to shoot enemies out of the sky. I think the reason I hate this minigame so much is because there's pretty much no rhythm involved in it. When I was a child, it took me days to beat this minigame. I return to it now as a newly christened adult, and no, I wasn't just bad at the game, this minigame just sucks ass. I can't understand how it works, and it's pretty much the only one that I've never attempted to get a perfect rank on. I literally do not think it's possible. Please correct me if I'm wrong and you think Gone with the Wind is actually the best minigame, or that it isn't ridiculously hard due to the poor integration of the motion controls. I think I viscerally hate it so much because it's literally the only part of the game I actively dislike. Apart from that though, the gameplay in Rhythm Thief is generally pretty polished, fun and full of personality. It's a pretty short game, clocking in at about 10-ish hours, but the amount of greatness that is packed into this little package makes it worth it for me. Plus I've probably boosted those gameplay hours tenfold from the amount of times I've replayed it. There was clearly so much passion put into this game, so many ideas, and the Frenchness of it all is sublime. Shun Nakamura and Sayaka Yamato, great job. I have only one question for you. The biggest crime that humanity has ever committed is letting this game undersell. Okay, so that was a bit dramatic, but still. A mobile game spin-off was released that a lot of people credit as a sequel, but apparently it was stuffed full of microtransactions and was literally just the first few levels of the 3DS game. I never played it, so I'm just going off of anecdotal evidence, but still can't even buy it anymore, so it can't have been that important to the RTCU. I have vowed to myself not to spoil this game, but I have to include one minor spoiler to make my point about this game's clear intention to have been part of something bigger. Though the self-contained story is a complete one, there's an overarching plot that ends on a cliffhanger. Like, clearly there was an intention to make more of these. One of the directors, Nakamura, stated in an article published in 2012 that "I have many things I would like to do for the game system and scenario. I think the sequel will exceed the original if I could realise exactly what I currently have in mind." Notice that he said will. I think the fact that this game undersold may have dashed those hopes of the sequel, because I cannot find any source stating that a sequel is in development since. As far as I can gather, the game's obscurity was spurred on by the fact that the supply in North America was extremely limited, and whatever the hell Nintendo was doing with the marketing. Nothing. In Japan it got a promotional concert. Where was ours? This game is a great time, but whenever I finish it I just feel sad because of everything that could have been. I've signed petitions, I've hoped and watched, but I just don't think a sequel's ever going to happen. Which is really, really sad, because Rhythm Thief has so much potential to be great. Nakamura went on to make Sonic Forces though, so maybe it's a good thing that the sequel never happened. So I've said my piece. What to do with my inane ramblings is up to you, but I highly suggest you find some way to get a hold of this game. Physical copies are apparently rare. I'm one of the lucky ones who own it, but I'm pretty sure digital copies are still available to grab. I just want more people to experience Rhythm Thief because it deserved so much better. It was packed with personality and relative amounts of challenge, fun characters, a great soundtrack, and it's just generally a really good time that not enough people have had. The popularity of looting the Louvre on TikTok gave me some hope, but I think, as most trends are, it was fleeting. I can implore you as much as I want, but I've done what I can at this point. I've probably done a better job marketing Rhythm Thief than Nintendo did. I know those of you who own a 3DS haven't thrown it away, that precious childhood memory is too dear. So head down to a secondhand game store, check eBay, Amazon, the eShop, anything. Please just try and find a way to give this game a go. I really don't think you'll regret it. How long was this? Christ, 35 minutes? Half of that's probably just me, like, coughing.